What's going on, everybody? It's your man Plyrock alongside the beautiful, sexy Professor Preach, and we got an absolutely special guest here today. One of our best friends. We've known him for a long time. He's been an integral part of the Plyrock Nation community and also a fantastic streamer in his own right on Twitch. Blackjack, what's going on, dude? Welcome in. So nice to have you here. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and it's just such an honor to be able to, partake in your guys' show. Like you said, I've been a fan for years, and we go way back. So happy to be here for sure.
It's an honor to have you here. I have known Blackjack, formerly Yackley Yak, one of the very first people I hung out with on Twitch back in 2018. And we heard you were doing some exciting things. And before we get into the exciting research and things that you are doing, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your service, and everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So I served in the U.S. Air Force from 2010 to 2018. During that time, I operated on drones, and we aren't talking about the little dinky ones that you see and people putzing around with and things like that. We're talking about the big ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are in the movies, all that stuff, Transformers, Eagle Eye, all that jazz. So I operated on the MQ-9 Reaper. That was my plane, my baby, with it, and that is a two-man crew, man or woman crew. It's just you've got a pilot that controls the plane. They also pull the trigger for like a weapon to come off. And they're employing weapons, and then you've got the sensor operator, which was my role
Mm-hmm.
on the MQ-9, and that's, you think of kind of the camera operator at that point. So I was adjusting focuses, create, even manually manipulating the picture to pull out like contrast, brightness, that kind of stuff. Be
Mm-hmm.
able to see different things that we're looking at with it, and then also firing a laser and guiding any of the munitions.
Mm-hmm.
Most munitions have around a 30-second time of flight with them. So for once the pilot did their duty and pulled the trigger, for the next 30 seconds, it was all on me.
Yeah, you're aiming.
Wherever I moved that crosshairs, was where the weapon was going, kind of
Wow.
thing. So I flew over 1,000 combat missions. I got just over 3,400 hours with the aircraft. I was just shy of 3,000 before when I left combat in 2015. So, which is pretty wild when you think about it, because I only logged 400 hours over the next 6 years
Wow.
with it. So, just to say that we were in this crazy high, ops tempo is an understatement for sure.
So you flew most of those, you saying for, when you say the 3,000 hours, what was the date range when you did that? What were the years? Was
Yeah,
that
that
the
would have been
entire
2011 to 2015.
2011 to 2015? So that President Obama was famous for the drones. He loved the drone
Yes.
strikes. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I was asking.
Yep.
That's wild, man. You were busy.
Oh yes. Very, very busy.
You're describing
So
it, and I'm thinking of Call of Duty with the A1C. What were the
yes.
camera? The when you say you were controlling the camera, and
Mhm.
what was the fidelity of the image you were seeing? Was it like what we're used to from like General Schwarzkopf back in the Gulf War? Was like black and white and way up here, or were you getting in there and seeing like high detail? Like what was the
It,
camera like?
Absolutely. That's probably one of the most like common questions I get, right? With that, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what could you see, kind of thing. And it
Yeah.
was actually because I got to see both. I got to
Okay.
see when we were back in standard def, which that was more of like a, hey, there's a blob on the screen, kind of thing. And like, because we,
Blinking.
we,
So,
we
yeah.
have an infrared camera that we could utilize. And then we could also utilize just an electro optical or a day TV
Okay.
camera. If you remember the scene in like American Sniper,
Mm-hmm.
where they show that right before the sandstorm rolls in,
Mm-hmm.
and they show the Reaper feed there. That is one of the most accurate depictions and closely representative in any movie to what it looks like
Oh wow.
uh, there.
Okay.
So we could see, even if we were, obviously the lower you are, the better the fidelity gets.
Yes.
But obviously, the lower I get, now I start making my audible signature known. So, usually drones, we like to stay really up high, away, not being able to be seen and things like that, because you can see them. If you know what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
it is possible. You can get wing flashes, things like that with it from the sun. But to answer your question with that, usually, depending on the altitude we were at, I could probably see a license plate. I could definitely see the background color, and I could
Okay.
probably see the color of the letters. But unless I was down at like 10,000 feet, then I could probably make out what the letters say
Okay.
on the license plate. But up at like we're operating around 20 to 30,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Your typical airliner usually settles in at around 33,000 feet
Mm-hmm.
there. So usually we were still pretty high up, so you couldn't see it, but I could still tell that you guys had logos on your hats, kind of thing. I couldn't make it
Mm-hmm.
out, right? I
Yeah.
couldn't make out exactly what the logo is, but I can tell that there's something on some logo on the hat, kind of thing. So
Okay.
needless to say, from at 26,000 feet, that's pretty dang good.
Yeah, I can only
If
imagine
you,
it's gotten better and crazier since too, just
exactly,
as
exactly.
definition moves up.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
I,
So yeah, it was cool.
I
It was cool.
bet you it was stressful though. Tell us about some of the things based upon what you're working on. Tell us, what your experience was like while you did this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
So, it was unique in the operations, and it was unique in a couple different ways. One, you had a very uh, dynamic work-life balance, right?
Hmm.
So, because we were stationed outside of Las Vegas, we had about a 30-minute drive up to work. So then you're starting to add on transits and things like that. And most of the time, when people operated a shift, they would be 8 hours or 12 hours
Hmm.
there. Now, usually you weren't always we call it in the box, right, at the controls for
Yep.
that full shift, but there absolutely was times where that would happen, and especially with certain units, there were ones that flew continuously for 12-hour shifts, which is just crazy. You think of gaming sessions and stuff like that, right? Sitting there every single day for years on end, sitting and doing like an 8 or 12 hour, gaming session. It's
That's
just
a lot.
it is. It's a
I'm
ton.
tired at 2.5, and I'm not
I
even
know,
doing that.
exactly. Exactly. Same.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
that work life balance was really hard because what we call it is flipping the switch,
Yep.
right? We'd go from, all right, I'm at home, now I gotta go into work. And when I get into work, now I gotta shut off all the home stuff, right? I gotta shut off. I can't deal with the bills. I can't deal with, if I got, fighting an HOA or whatever, right? I just gotta shut
Yeah.
all that stuff off because the moment I step through that door and into my combat unit, now my brain is essentially 7,500 miles away because I'm sitting in it looks like a shipping container,
Hmm.
about size is what a ground control station for one of those aircraft are.
Okay.
And the aircraft, just to put it in perspective, it has a 66-foot wingspan on
Ooh.
average with it. So it's not small, right? With it, it's not a small aircraft with it. It's something 20 something feet long. If I
Okay.
remember right off the top of my head, some of those numbers escape me occasionally, but every once in a while I still got it with it. But
Yeah.
so it's not a small aircraft by any means with it. And yeah, so just the operations tempo of it could be very high.
Hmm.
And it was both ends of the coin. Because 95% of the time we would be just kind of sitting there and just watching. And you think about it, if it's daytime in the US, it's nighttime over in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So, during the day, we wouldn't do a whole heck of a lot because we were sitting there and just watching them sleep,
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially at that point.
Yeah.
So, that was part of it as well.
Hmm.
Um, so, where you're trying to flip your brain on where you're operating, that kind of thing. Most of the time, it's super mundane, right? You're not doing a whole heck of a lot as far as the operations go. There's times where I could sit down and never touch a control for 8 hours, but I got to pay attention on what's happening on that screen the entire time because if all of a sudden the dude gets up to go take a leak, I got to go follow him,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It's like a
You know,
stakeout.
yeah, it
Like
really
the
was.
cops sitting outside the
Yeah,
building for 20
yep,
hours, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden the action hits, that 30 seconds, that 60 seconds. Oh shit, we
exactly.
gotta go.
Yep, 100%.
I can
So,
only imagine what that was like.
then you're
Whew.
just yeah, you're just pushing yourself to the limit with that, and then there was more dynamic taskings too. Sometimes we'd be doing like convoy overwatches, right, where we're
Hmm.
following a bunch of Humvees that are in a line, and we're trying to make sure they're not getting attacked or ambushed.
Yeah, cover
Or
fire.
we do like route clearing, like go out ahead of them and clear routes. We clear landing zones for helicopters. Um, if they were raiding through, if they're looking for somebody or something like that, we'd
Mm-hmm.
help them do Overwatch for raids and things like that as well, for raid
Wow.
support. So, there was, I can't say never a dull moment, because there was a lot of dull moments
Yeah.
with it, right? But there was always, you always had it in the back of your mind that at any given minute,
Mm-hmm.
somebody could walk in or come over radio and go, "Hey, we need you here now."
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I got to perform at this super high level that I'm constantly training to. That we're
Mm-hmm.
constantly training. I mean, daily you're training and pushing yourself, with it. And so it made it, that aspect to it made it difficult, because you just didn't know what you were walking into on that day. And like I
Anxiety
said,
must have started to build because you're
absolutely.
just constantly on edge.
Yeah.
Like, and then the adrenaline hits,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't imagine, but I guess I mean, not in that
Sure.
situation, but just having that, I'm sure that low hanging little pit in your stomach all
Mm-hmm.
the time while you're
Well, that, and then
watching.
it was nothing. There's
Yeah.
nothing worse than doing that, and you're like on the hook to strike a target,
Yeah.
and you're waiting for him to like take a left, right? And then they keep making rights, keep making rights, keep making
Yeah.
rights. And there's days where you'd be sitting there and you're just like finger on the trigger, ready to go, ready to go. And then at the end of shift comes, and you just get up and walk out,
Yeah.
and somebody
Done.
else taps,
Yeah.
because what happens in that situation is usually somebody comes in, taps you out. They sit down and you brief them on, hey, this is what I've been doing, this is what I've been watching,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. You
Tag
can
them
kind of
in.
backfill them. Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Tag team and wrestling, right? Just
Yeah.
all right, tag them in. They get briefed on what's going on. But that was almost worse, right? Because you're sitting there waiting, and you're like, all right, this is gonna happen any second, and then 6 hours goes by, 7 hours goes by, and then
Oof.
somebody comes in, takes the, and then even worse on top of that is you'd come in the next day and you'd be like, "Oh, did they get it?" And they'd be like, "Yep, 15 minutes after you left." And you're like, "Come on,"
You did all the
So it's
work.
like it's this messed up mental gymnastics, with it too, because like you feel a little bit of ownership in that role, right? You
Yeah.
feel, you put in the time to watch that target for, whatever. And like I said, there's times where we watched, we'd be tracking guys for months, years, if they were super crafty,
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't dumb, they knew what was going on,
Yeah.
so they'd find ways to try to counter it, as well. So you've got just this crazy mental gymnastics, right, that you're doing on any given day, right, with it. And you're trying to deal with this work life home balance,
Mm-hmm.
with it all, and it just makes it hard, and like you said, the anxiety builds. And the best way I can describe it is, well, think about it. If you took somebody, locked them in a box for 4 years, had them watch some of the most horrendous things out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then opened the box and said, "All right, go, go be normal." Like,
Yeah.
there's no way.
A lot of
And we didn't,
soldiers.
especially back then. Yeah, we didn't have the support that they do now, with like psychological support and things like that, right? We had a psychologist embedded in the unit, but it was like, hey, if you need to talk, they're here. But at the same time, look at the stigmas with mental health now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough to get people to go talk about, if they have just a little bit of anxiety or things like that in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're talking at this crazy high level, that you're expected to perform, and then, but oh, hey, go admit that if you're having a problem. Like, there was no chance, with
Yeah.
it, because in the community, the stigma was absolutely there. And I
Wow.
think that's where, a lot of people are paying the price now
I would
for it.
think, especially in the military, you want to be seen. Number one is supporting your brothers and sisters in arms, the fellow
Absolutely.
people around you. But number two, you also want to be it's the culture of, I'm not weak, I'm strong.
Yeah.
So, and then a lot of people have, like you're talking about, the stigma of, well, if I admit that I'm feeling this way and I admit these things, then I'm going to be seen as weak,
Yes.
especially, I'm assuming,
Absolutely.
among a lot of men in the service,
Hmm.
as men in
Hmm.
society. And so I can only imagine what you went through. First of all, thank you for your service.
Yeah. My
That's
pleasure.
amazing. And then I think back to the scene in one of my favorite movie. He's my hero, General Patton.
Yeah.
And he goes like how the army and the army, but the military in general has had to learn over the years that the things they do really affect the soldiers, and they've had to get better and better at helping you get back to the real world, helping you readjust to society, and not just dumping you back into 9 to 5, going to work and wife, kids, husband, whatever it is. I remember that
Absolutely.
scene when General Patton walks in. It's a true story, but he walks into that field hospital and he's saying he's checking all the soldiers with the injuries.
Hmm.
Guy missing an arm, guy missing a leg, et cetera, et cetera. He comes up to the guy who's sitting on the ends of the bed and he's like, "What's wrong with you, soldier?" "I don't know, sir. I can't stop shaking."
Hmm.
"Shaking? Were you injured?" "No, I'm just, he was sad. He was scared. Like he had, the battle had broken him."
Yeah.
And even General Patton back then slapped him across the face and said, "Get this coward out of
Hmm.
my." And he got in huge trouble for that. He had to apologize, and General
Yeah.
Eisenhower made him apologize. But even back then, I know it's a little different, but back then, he saw him as weak. This guy,
Absolutely.
and the guy wasn't weak.
Yeah.
I can tell you 99% of the planet doing what you did would crack under pressure. You did it for 8 years. So,
Yeah.
I mean, trust me. I've seen. I worked in retail. I've had employees. They can't even
Hmm.
handle a 9 to 5 here, let alone running combat missions around the world.
Exactly.
So hats off. But I just relate when you're talking about that, how the military is, and I know you're doing important work, and we're going to get into that soon. How the military needs this information, and they need to adjust how they handle the heroes, the brave men and women, as well, number one, as they do the job, but
Yeah.
number two, as they come back out into civilian life. They all can't turn into John Rambo in the police station. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
that famous scene at the end,
Yeah.
like that's true shit. Like
No,
that,
absolutely.
right? Go
And
ahead.
that's the big thing with it, right? Is there's so many people that got affected by it. Maybe they didn't realize it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're coming home and now years later, like I mean, I've been removed for combat for 10 years. I still fight daily, with my PTSD and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And get there and I'm going, what in the heck was that thought? Or why can't I get off this one point in my head and just do it this way instead? Kind of thing. And it's just when you're in such a rigorous community and you've got everyone around you, telling you that, just like the General Patton thing, right? That,
Yeah.
you can't have these issues. It's just the classic one, right? Is it's just a video game, right? And
Yeah.
to which I say, that's a weak argument because one, there ain't no reset button.
No.
What I
No
do,
extra
what I do
lives
at the end
either.
of the day is exactly, what I do at the end of the day is real people suffering the consequences,
Oh.
good or bad. So when you're doing that constantly, and that's the hard thing with the mental health in general, and that's why we'll get to the study that I'm trying to conduct is because I've been through the VA system, right? I've
Oof.
been through the programs, I've been through the outpatient, I've been through the inpatient,
Yeah.
right? I've done it all, over almost 8 years of recognizing finally when I got out that hey, something's not right up here. I had family going, you're really touchy and things like that, and I would just go off the handle in a second. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what the heck is going on? And then I realized real quickly, starting to go work through the system with it, that just like you talk about, back in the day, it was a lot of they called it shell shock.
Yeah.
That was what they called it in World War II is shell shock
Mm-hmm.
with it. And then they've had different names for it over the years and things like that with it. But it all stems from the same thing. Now the hard part with this, and especially with drone operations, is actually what it falls more underneath is would be what's called complex PTSD. And complex PTSD is when you're in sustained environments of seeing repeated, dealing with repeated traumas over and over and over again. So it's not necessarily, I'm in Vietnam, I've got a buddy that walks and steps on a landmine, and, I watch him get blown up. Obviously that's a majorly traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that presents itself a little differently than someone that just eventually goes completely numb to it all, and you're just having to sit there and sustain for years on end, with it. And that was the hard part, was back then is they didn't recognize that, we always talked about it. They said, hey, we really need to, give people a break. And, because that's the hard thing with all other operations out there, fighter pilots, other, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How they operate is when they're in combat, they're in combat, right? When they come home, they're training. We did all of that just rolled up in one.
Yeah.
So I could go from any given day to spending 6 hours, we call it in the box, right? Flying, doing the job. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got to pop out, and during my break, I got to go teach an event because I was also a combat instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So I would teach people how to do all these advanced tactics and different things like that. And
Top Gun.
with it, oh yeah,
Yeah. I knew you
and
would.
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. So, and so dealing with that kind of thing, and just getting bounced around and kicked around, and then I'm having to go in and talk about, more weapons things and stuff like that, and just being constantly, you know, um, constantly subjected to seeing, those types of things. And this is, we talked about prior to starting this, earlier in our meeting,
Mm-hmm.
with the discussion of everything we did was recorded. So it didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter, what you were doing. Everything was recorded, and that also meant, one, that these feeds could get pushed anywhere, right? I mean, you could have, the president of the United States watching a live drone feed, right?
Yes.
With it, that's completely a normal thing, right?
Yeah. In the
With
Situation
it,
Room.
and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he could be authorizing, the strike, and now obviously that goes through the wickets, but it's pretty dang stressful when when you get word that, oh, by the way, this is getting pushed pretty high up, kind of thing. So then you add that layer on top of it, with it, and then you add the shift work on top of it, and for me, I was on 7 week rotations. There were guys that they went crazy those years with the rotations. They were throwing guys on 4 week rotations, which I thought was just insane. That's such a fast swap to do to your body. And it's not just, oh, I'm going from nights to days. You were doing the three different shifts. So you were doing 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., 4 p.m. to midnight, midnight to 8 a.m. And I was rotating on that on a 7 week rotation for 4 years. You want to talk about being tired at the end of that? I was beat.
Yeah.
At that point, I was just so drained and so exhausted. I fought with insomnia for a good year of
Ooh.
that because I just wasn't sleeping. Because then your body starts getting used to when you start rotating. And then it
Mm-hmm.
starts going, oh, wait, we got to rotate in a week and a half. And I'm like, yes, a week and a half. And it's like, so now? And I'm like, no, 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 no. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, let's do it now. And I'm like, stop. No, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, I don't want to do this right now. And it's just be like, nope, you're fine. We're going to rotate. And then, so then you start sleeping less and less, and you
That
start
makes it
staying
10
up
times
later and
worse.
later. Yeah. And then but then you still got to go in and do the job,
Yeah.
kind of thing, and expected to do it at this high level.
Oh, your cortisol
Uh,
levels. Oh my
yeah,
God. Everything. Your
absolutely,
hormones are all out of whack.
absolutely.
I,
So it was just crazy with it all, and really getting into the why I'm doing this study is, and I'll kind of cover that here in a minute too, but
mm-hmm.
um the whole reason for this is, one, there's only ever been two studies, really big documented studies by a guy named Wayne Chappelle, both in 2014 and 2019, with it. And that one looked at the imagery analysts. So there's people that would support the operations, and they'd be watching our live feeds, and
Mm-hmm.
they'd be, essentially, yeah, they're not at the controls, but they're intaking everything we are,
Yeah.
including the radio chat or everything like that. So, they absolutely still get affected by it. And so there was one study, I believe that was the 2014 one,
Mm-hmm.
that looked at them specifically, but that was active duty,
Okay.
right? Which, that makes it even worse because of everything we've just talked about, right?
Yeah.
How many people on active duty on a contract with the U.S. military are going to be like, "Hey, I have a problem. I got
Yeah.
an
No.
issue." Like, no
Yeah.
one wants to do that. So of course, I think, one, you deal with a lot of skewed numbers with that and statistics with it,
Mm-hmm.
as well. And then you had one that actually looked at the operators in 2019, and again, it was, it got a, I can't remember how many participants were in that one. I think it was like 300 something. But
And
I think the
this
biggest
was the 2019 one. Sorry to interrupt. Was
Yep,
active or retired or
active as well. Yep,
So
active as well.
They were both active.
so are
Hmm.
you
It was just different people. Yeah.
Yes,
okay?
correct.
And this gentleman was studying imagery, like you just said, like the constant bombardment of negative imagery
Yep,
with them.
absolutely.
It
Yep.
reminds
So
me of I've heard a lot. Well, first of all, I have a real world example, real quick,
sure.
of what you're talking about. I had a friend who worked in the life insurance industry,
Hmm.
and she was in the call center, and she took the calls for the life insurance policies, and they first of all, their turnover rate was ridiculous for
I
this
bet.
call center for life insurance. And they had on call all the time in the office psychologists, religious leaders, in like, I don't want to say, I don't remember the name of the insurance company, but they had like active trauma centers for the call center people just for listening to the horrific stories as these people called up and said, my husband fell in the wood chipper or whatever
Hmm.
it was. I got to call it in. And she lasted like 6 months.
Yeah.
The other thing I think of when you talk about imagery is I've heard stories of the people who have to go through Facebook and
Hmm.
Twitter and the other social media sites, and they have to scrub the site trying to find illegal things, underage things. Obviously, the videos of people who do bad things live on video,
Yeah.
all those things. And they also are going through to obviously a different level, but they're going through what you're talking about, where they have to just constantly be bombarded with
Absolutely.
horrid imagery
Hmm.
and the
And
constant,
trauma is trauma when you break it down, right?
yeah,
It doesn't matter how it happened. One isn't necessarily more valid than the other. It's just, can one be a little more gruesome than the other? Sure.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, your brain, that lump of meat processes trauma in very similar ways, regardless
Mhm.
of how it presents itself.
yeah, physically too.
Exactly. And so there's
Hormones
a
are
lot of physical
hormones.
things with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so that's the hard part. With it is just there wasn't the support there. There wasn't the and how do we blow off steam? We went and drank alcohol. And that
Yeah.
just exasperated everything. It was when there was a successful strike, it was all right. Let's go party. And
Yeah. Let's celebrate.
let's all celebrate because we did the job, we did the thing right that we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And which in the moment felt great, but then having it process everything and really have your brain process what just happened, that wasn't doing us any favors. But that was the ultimate coping for it all. And so that was the hard part, is that just exasperated everything with the entire situation, because that was our only coping mechanism.
Let me ask you a question. So this
Yeah.
kind of got me interested, and you may be able to answer it a little bit more when you start talking about your study. But
Hmm.
I'm curious if the operators who were the image processors,
Hmm.
I wonder how they dealt with. Do you think it was better or worse for them because they didn't have the outlet of having control? And I'm curious how the brain would process that differently if you're just always having to watch the horrible things, but you don't even have like even the slightest sense of control if you're controlling the camera, or let's say you see somebody do a bad thing, and then finally you get the order to shoot that bad person. You kind of get a little bit of a relief out of it. I'm wondering if the people, I don't know, there may be no difference, but I would be curious to see if the people who had no actual like visual ability to have an impact and get that out of their system, even if it's just a matter of flying the drone, like you still feel like you have some control of the situation, versus someone who just has to take it all in, and they're just sitting there taking it in. They never get a sense of control over what's going on. I wonder if they have a more or less or different processing of the information. I'm just curious. I don't know if the studies you mentioned already kind of got into that, or if that would be something interesting to add to your study to see like if there were like elements of that because when you were talking about it, I was like, I wonder if that would happen, if it would cause them to process the data or the information in their brain slightly differently without that.
I would say with that, two things get brought up with that. One, you're talking a little bit with having like the physical control thing. I think that's where there's there's also can't think of the term for it right now off the top of my head, but there's also what's called moral injury.
Yeah, I was gonna
Did you
ask
feel like you're
this.
responsible?
And
Yeah, a
Yeah.
human
so
life is a human
that
life.
yes, exactly. So and that can play on both sides, right? Because
Mhm.
me being the operator, I probably I felt more responsibility, obviously, especially with the times where I was physically at the controls, physically being the one guiding the weapon in. But that, that really didn't, when I look back on that and then just some things that I observed,
Mhm.
from maybe just standing behind someone, right? I watched a guy, and like I said, you see all these horrific things. I mean, not only what the weapons do to them, but what they do to each other,
Yeah.
as well. And that's the hard part, when we talk about this, they just they can be so barbaric, with some of the cultures and things like that with it, which is, you know, doing these horrendous things and with it. And the hard thing with that is there was times where it's like I wasn't even at the controls, and I just was sitting over somebody's shoulder and maybe just making sure they're doing their safety checks and everything like that. But I'm still a part of it,
Yeah.
and I feel like obviously with the intelligence community that also plays a role in that as well, is because they're the ones creating, on different levels. There's different levels to it and different missions that you can do with it. So not everybody does the same thing when it comes to the missions themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But they might be able to be. They might be the ones that are no kidding going, "Hey, that guy's carrying a mortar tube, or he's carrying no, that's a baseball bat," and they're
Right.
making the call. And then the RPA crew is then turning around and striking that target based off the intelligence. So I would argue they have just as much of a stake
Mhm.
in that, because they are still part of that decision making process when it comes down to how those strikes are going down with it.
Yeah.
And it might be even just to a level of they're planning out, if I'm going to put a missile in this room, because I want the room to go away. Well, they're also helping and figuring out,
How
what
to
trajectory does that need to come in. So
a
their
part of it
role
too,
is
yes.
just as invested and equally as important for
Mhm.
this successful, contribution for that strike. So and that is where with this study I am looking at, and even with some of the feedback I've gotten today alone, I just made this study public like last night. And I've already got handful of people from the intelligence community reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you include us? And I'm like, absolutely. Because it should be, across the
Mhm.
board, because I know that, obviously they're going to be struggling as well.
I mean, it makes me
Uh,
think of, so you can maybe shed some light on this, but I think there's a really famous like public example of the drone I think it was during one of Obama's anyway, where they hit a car. I think it was maybe in Afghanistan. I can't remember. It was over there somewhere. But they hit a car, and people thought at first that it was terrorists carrying something. It ended up not being. It just was like a family
It
with
was a
some kids or
funeral
something. Yeah, it was like a funeral, and so that
or
was
a
a big. So
wedding.
I
It was
was
a
when
wedding.
you're talking about this,
I remember
that's
that.
what I was thinking about. I'm sure somebody was like, whoever the analyst was who got it wrong, I'm sure they felt some super heavy sense
Oh,
of responsibility for it, that they got that. It wasn't just the people who pulled the trigger, it's the people who said that's the target. And I'm sure that that's a it just made me think of that example right off the bat, that I'm sure that is a very heavy burden on some people, a lot of people that were involved in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's just, like I said, anybody in the decision making, even if it was just somebody there in a leadership role,
Yeah.
right? Not even qualified to ever pull a trigger or touch and control or anything like that.
mhm.
They still had access to the ground control stations, right?
Mhm.
They would still come in and check in. We'd have senior leaders that would come in and, hey, how you guys doing? Blah blah blah. You need anything?
Yeah.
And they're still sitting there watching the same thing, right? They still get the same feeds, when they go back to their desk of the strike that happened last night, and they rewatch it over and over and over again, with it, and so that's the big piece of it is, all that data was attainable, right? All that data was accessible at any given time, to go back. I mean, we had logs and logs and logs of every strike we'd ever done, and we could pull a video in seconds, even from a
Yeah.
strike from four years previous,
Yeah.
with it. So, just having all that access to that data, and we did it for precision. We did it for learning these lessons and pushing each other harder to be better. Which then that incorporates its own level of
Yeah.
stress.
Stress.
With
Yep.
everything. Because then you get stress from your peers. going like, hey, why'd you screw that up? Or hey, what, why didn't you do this? Or, why
Mhm.
didn't you XYZ? So then you feel guilty. And, with it, if you do screw something up, or you feel guilty, or that you're letting, your team members down because you're spending, days, years on end, with
Camaraderie.
these people. Exactly. The camaraderie you get with it is immense.
Yeah.
With it, because you are so close knit, and that was also why, our career field was unique. In most military, officers and enlisted ranks don't mix. Ours obviously did, because your pilot is an officer and your sensor operator is an enlisted air crew. So you'd sit there and talk about life, if
Yeah.
especially if it was just, hey, I'm just watching some guy sleep, or I'm just watching some truck go doing some road trip,
Mhm.
for 20 hours, and I've got a track on him, and I'm just sitting there, all right, twiddling my thumbs, right, for
Yeah.
8 hours, and going, all right, just got to watch this track and make it doesn't break, and as long as the car stays in there, cool. So you're chatting about life, you're chatting about, what you did that weekend, what you're doing in school, what you're doing, how your wife, kids, whatever, it is.
And
So,
then boom.
you get a lot more personal. And then, yeah, exactly.
And then all
And
of a
then all of a
sudden,
sudden, you
yeah,
get just yanked out of it and ripped out of it and go,
yeah,
hey, go right now.
it's
And
go
it's like,
time.
oh, okay, we got to go. Right.
Yeah.
And you don't have time to react. You don't have time to, and
Adjust.
that's why we trained so much. I
Yeah.
mean, just constantly. If you weren't doing an active mission, you were training, kind of thing. And it was just so, the level of scrutiny, the level of stress, the level of operation tempo of it all just made it a very unique melting pot for a really bad scenario, psychologically, for the people that now have to deal with it. And like I said, the hard thing is that, and even if, if you would have asked me 8 years ago, do I consider myself a combat veteran? I would have told you no.
Hmm.
I genuinely didn't believe it. And that now is insane to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Arguably, we had some of the most effects, with it, because we sat around and watched what happened after the fact too. Right? This isn't World War II or any other operation, in like a crewed aircraft where I'm going in, flying, dropping a bomb.
Then you're out.
What do they do
Yeah.
after? They're out, right? They're like, all right, my job's done. See ya. Nah, we sat there, we watched
Had to
everything
record
up
it.
to
Yeah.
that point, right? We watched the entire thing, no matter how long that was. It could be months, could be years that we watched somebody. And then, so you get a personal, you get personally vested in those targets and things like that. And there's a really good book called On Killing Remotely, by the author Wayne Phelps. He was in the Marines.
Hmm.
And he wrote an amazing book on this whole thing, with it. And it's incredible. And it talks about that exact thing, right? You take a personal stake in what you're doing, with it, because obviously you want to do well. You want to strive. You want to, be the best. With it, you want to have your number called. When somebody comes in and goes, "Hey, we need this target taken out," you want somebody to look at you and go, "You're our guy." Right?
Yeah.
With it, and you want to be that guy. Especially
You're
in the
defending your
military.
country too. Like you're,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. There's a sense of pride with that. So,
yeah.
for me, that was a big part of it. Was looking at it and looking at the people above me, and being like, I want to be that guy. And
Hmm.
so then you're just pushing yourself harder and harder and harder, with it all. And then, like I said, they do all the military does an amazing job of training. Right? They don't do a great job of what comes after the fact, with it all. And so that's the hard part now, and that's the whole reason for the study and kind of getting into that, is, the why is because there's just not the support out there. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I've sat down in front of a doc or whatever it is and been like, all right, let me see. And then in my head I'm going, all right, let me see where this guy's at. Do you know what a drone is? And then it's just like, um yeah, I think so. And I'm like, okay, this is gonna go well. I'm like, not
Yeah.
at all. It's like I'm just like, so I gotta try to, like, describe pretty much everything I just said, to you, and try to sit there in an appointment, that is gonna go, maybe 30 minutes, and
And
I
you
gotta
spend
spend
25 of it.
25 of
Yeah.
it exactly, just to try
Yeah.
to describe what the heck a drone even is, with it. And so that part just gets so frustrating when you're sitting there and being like,
Yeah.
I just want to get better, right? I just want to
Mhm.
make my life a little bit better, and not get so affected by this.
Yeah.
Because some of the things that people don't recognize, obviously, with PTSD, is obviously a lot of people, assume like, all right, you're gonna have nightmares and night sweats, right? And you see all the commercials and things like that with it, and the guy that's like, freaking out, and then he's got his dog comes up and starts licking him in the face and waking him up, which I can't see him, but I do have a service dog. He sits right
Hmm.
behind me. There, his name's
Dogs are the
Hawk, and
best.
he's amazing. He's absolutely amazing.
God's
He's changed
greatest
my life
gift.
for the better. Absolutely.
Hmm.
And so, but there's so much more to that too. There's memory issues with it, right? My short term is just dog shit. At the end of the day, I can't remember much of anything.
Hmm.
If I don't write stuff down, I'm like sit there and just fight with my own head of like, what was that again? Kind of thing daily. I forget where I put my keys, for my wallet. When you do that every single day, it gets really frustrating.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just like,
You need air
again.
tags on
Um,
everything.
Oh, I do. I
Yeah.
do. I got them all. Not even kidding you.
Yeah,
I got
no, I
everything on
believe it.
everything. With it.
Yep.
And so, that's the part of it that, and obviously there's the irritability, right? There's when someone talks to you in a certain way and your brain is processing it in one manner and you can't necessarily get out, the why with it. So then someone's like, "Oh, you're getting so irritable." And it's like, "Well, no, it's just my brain thinks of it in very certain ways and trying to process it in this other way takes time." With it and,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. Because especially with that job, and the things that I've talked about, you had to be just on your A game 24/7. With it, you had to be ready to go at any given time. That at any moment when you
Yeah.
were sitting in that seat, somebody could be like, "Hey, you're either pulling the trigger you're sitting at, or you're running across a hangar to go jump into another box to tap somebody that's not qualified out to jump in the seat. All right, are all my controls set? Is everything good to go? Do I have everything the way I'm used to operating it with? All right, because in 30 seconds I got to pull a trigger and launch a weapon." Right. And it's like, 'cause can you imagine if you like went to sit down at a desk, if you had a
Hmm.
desk job and you go and sit at Jason's desk today, and you're trying to do your normal work at this other guy's desk, and you're like, where the fuck is the stapler?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's the same, but it's not,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
made it,
Yeah.
so it just made it difficult because you're sitting there going, all right, what the heck? Oh man, this guy, didn't set this up right, or didn't set this to a standard and things like that. Because we had these crazy standards for how all the settings would be, by default. So that way we could eliminate that. But of course, everybody tweaks things and stuff like that too. So it's just like I said, you throw it in as just a melting pot of everything that could go wrong,
Yeah.
as far as handling a community,
Yeah.
and handling their mental health. It was a fail from the beginning.
Yeah. Humans weren't built for
Unfortunately,
this.
no.
We have to adjust over. So give us a little synopsis of your study that we're
Mhm.
talking about. And you had, was it published already or was it already released?
No, he's getting ready to do it.
You're getting
Yeah.
ready to do it.
Yep.
That's what I thought, because you had said you had
Yep.
some people contact you even
Yes.
today who are interested in. So first off, when you do public release it, we'd love to have you back on to talk about
Absolutely.
your findings on
Yeah,
this first
absolutely.
and foremost, and then share it with the audience too, to
Yeah.
as a follow up. So go ahead, give us a synopsis on what you're working on and what
Sure.
your goal is to what you think's gonna happen with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, I'm a doctoral student at the University of North Dakota.
Okay,
I'm working on my doctorate in psychology.
nice.
There. So I've got my other degrees that are all in aerospace. But because of just what I've dealt with, with mental
Mm-hmm.
health, I just really passionate about it, and I'm just fascinated by the way the brain works and how it processes information.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So I got into it, and then obviously you have to, work on a dissertation for it. And so I started thinking about, okay, what topic do I want to do? And I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer, right? Like I want to do, PTSD and drone operators
Mm-hmm.
with it. So the study is aimed at, I'm working on a lot of the background information right now, the empirical research with it, for it, and being able to eventually get a survey put out to veteran drone operators. So I'm trying to isolate down, which is a hard demographic to reach, with it, because of course, like now it's not like, oh, they just contact the units and then you got all this, everybody's housed in one area. No, everybody's gone off, do their own thing, kind of thing, and so It's just a hard one to reach, with it. But I also feel like that's also the one that's struggling the most, especially if they operated during, those times of like 2008 to 2016.
Hmm.
Anybody in there, if you're made a drone operator in there, like pat them on the back, man. They've been through hell. With it,
Hmm.
it's just they have, and it's an underrated community that isn't looked at enough and has never been looked at. So I'm trying to get max participation in this study to hopefully this summer is my timeline right now. I've still got to work out some of the tweaks with it, but I want to push out a survey that essentially is like a mental health survey with
Okay.
it, and be able to look at the numbers of it depending on if they were a pilot, if they were a sensor operator, or if they were in one of these other areas, being an intel or something like that as a support role,
Hmm.
and also focus on them too, and make sure that and then be able to compile an accurate snapshot of what are they dealing with now, what are they,
Hmm.
because a lot of these guys have been out of combat for 10 15 years now, but still are getting or having to deal with some of these adverse effects. So that's really where it comes down to, is just being able to capture the data from this really hard group to capture. And I'm using a lot of personal networks, and I posted it on LinkedIn, I posted it on Facebook, as well, and I've created a nice little flyer for the whole thing, and just trying to get a distro list right now is really where I'm at, is being able to get a distribution list out there and built. That way when I'm ready to push the study, like I said, I'm hoping this summer I can just blast it out to the distro list and go, hey everybody, thanks for your participation, knock this thing out, and then I'll work on the results,
So,
after the fact.
so have you already been through the IRB process? Because I know anytime you do it helped me. I actually was going to have a question, but now I know that you're
Sure.
doing it through a university.
Yep.
That at least lets me know that's where the review board will be.
Yep.
Have you already been through that, and they've already, or are you in that process now?
I'm in the process now. It's just trying to
Oh,
keep,
may the Lord have
get.
peace on your soul.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's garnered a lot of support. And even like my advisor and things
Hmm.
like that is very vested in it and has actually worked in this area before.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I'm really excited for it, and yeah, it's just trying to get as much info as possible. And I know also reaching this demographic is going to take time with it,
Hmm.
and I've reached out to like every veteran organization out there. You're talking Wounded Warrior Project, American Legion, 22 Until None, like all of it. Just any veteran, any organization that helps veterans in some way, I've
Hmm.
reached out to in the last 48 hours and just kind of given them a synopsis of like, hey, can you help promote this, just to try to reach, these people, and I think my phone hasn't stopped going off in the last day,
That's awesome.
with how many people I've texted, and people that I've never met before, people that came before me, that reached out being like, I had the pilot who was the very first pilot to ever launch a weapon from a UAS reach out to me and say, hey, I want
That's
to help.
cool.
Wow,
And
that's pretty cool.
I was like, the tactical savant in my head was just like, oh yeah, like that's
Yeah.
so cool,
Yeah.
I was just like, this is awesome. So that's it. It's just trying to get the word out there now about it to
Hmm.
reach this group, and that way I can get this list compiled, and I don't have to do it while I'm trying to also collect the results and do the
Yeah.
study and everything else. I have all that list already done. I have all of that stuff out there, and I'm just trying to get as far ahead of it as I can, because I know, and preach, just know what you see in your reaction with it, right? I know that this is a crazy hill to climb through the whole thing, right? With it all. And I know this is going to be a ton of hard work, but at the end of the day, with how much I've been impacted, how much I've seen it,
Hmm.
I've lost friends, to dealing with this as well. And, to suicide and things like that. And I want to do something good for this
Yeah.
community that, with how close knit we were, all of it, all the work we did, I just want to shed that light, and help these people that were put through so much and expected so much, and so quietly, at the end of the day, it's just, we're gonna just grind these guys down all the way, in every way possible, work life balance, stress, no sleep, all of it, in this that
Yeah.
made just that took out some of these people that, like I said, you talk about some of the strikes and things like that and examples, and I can't get into that, but there's things that are familiar,
Yeah.
with it, and it's like, and going like, oh, I remember, and So you get some of the best people in the world that ever graced this community, and now they can't even go into a store because they completely shut down, and a panic attack hits them because one item isn't on their list that they forgot about, and now they can't remember what that is, and then it throws them into a panic attack. I've been there. I mean,
Well, I
I
think
can't imagine. I can't imagine, or I can't count the number of like appointments I've had to cancel.
wow,
Because like
yeah.
I'm just not in a good place, mentally with it, and it just, and that part stinks, with it, and so it's just having dealt with it for so long. I don't want people to suffer. I don't want people to go through this and have to deal with it any longer than they have to. And this is one way that hopefully, we can make an impact and at
Mhm.
least getting people even talking about it
Hmm.
and, hopefully educating people. This is why I jumped at this opportunity, with you guys. And I'm so appreciative of it for both of you for, allowing me on this podcast because it's such a cool opportunity to be able to share my story and hopefully, change at least one person's life and realize that they're not alone, that they're not dealing with this by themselves, that there are other people out there that know exactly how they feel,
Mhm.
and that there is help.
Well, something that comes from now you got into my academic brain. I love it. Um, so part of I think what is really interesting about your study is because it was similar to mine with my university. It was almost like the beginning steps, and now other people are doing more off of that. I think that's kind of
Mhm.
what yours is doing. It will
Yep.
be a great It's like a great foundation, but I would love to see a study off of how civilians perceive what you guys, because I know, one of the complaints you always hear of people who are like, oh, these drone operators, they're just like the negative side of because they also had the same mentality that you were saying. A lot of the people that were in leadership who were putting you in those positions, like, oh, it's just a video game. They're just, these they don't even care. They don't know. It's just they're just pushing a button while they watch it, and they don't understand that no, the operators are very aware of what's going on. And I think there could be more studies going that direction too, kind of helping bring awareness to society in a larger scale about exactly how personal and these operators are, and really trying to help maybe bring awareness to more than just the military community about it's not emotionless, moralless people who think they're playing, little kids who think they're playing video games. These guys know exactly what's doing, and it does have, wear on their souls and stuff. I think it's really important. I think it'll absolutely spread out and it'll allow for more studies to, you know, sprout off of this. So it's very important what you're doing, like getting that first one out there and giving a basis for other people to build off of is super important. I know that's a big part of how academia works. You have to have that
Mhm.
first person who puts it out there, and then other people will find it and start building off of it. So that's really cool. I just
Absolutely.
wanted to say I
Yeah.
thought it was a cool idea.
Yeah, you got to kick that domino, right? And
Uh-huh.
be the guy to do that. And I've always been an outspoken person. As I know
Yes,
both
you
y'all know.
have.
So I'm like, I'm not afraid, man. I'm like, let's go. I'm like, I'll go stand on the freaking White House steps if I have to and scream at the world, like whatever, man. Like
Yeah.
I just want, like I said, there's just such important work we did, with it and being able to, get those avenues of help for people, and then realizing that there are things out there, they can do. There are, therapies that they can do as well. There's many different ones with like cognitive processing therapy, behavioral therapy, um, eye movement desensitization,
Yeah.
as well. I mean, there's so many different things out there that can help as well. It's just they got to ask for it, and then that's the biggest thing with it. And I think that's the biggest thing with anything, and this goes for anyone in any situation, not just military, not just drones, but anyone struggling. Period. Is the hardest thing to do is just to ask
Mm-hmm.
and take that step. And once you do that, you'll find there's a lot more support out there. There's a lot more resources out there. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not saying it's going to be easy. It's not everything's going to be handed to you, but there are ways to, help process that and help get better.
The same
With
with
it, it's
anything
just
in
that
life.
you have to just take that step forward. Absolutely,
You need to get healthy. The hardest part is getting to the gym. Once
exactly.
you're
Yeah.
in the gym, you do the work, but the work is easier than building up the system or the courage to go there in the first place. I'm
Absolutely.
curious, Blackjack, to
Okay.
sorry, Breach. When
No, it's
we
a
when we do a follow-up conversation, I'm curious where when you find your when you find some results and you're putting that study is gelling together nicely. I'm curious to see where video games do fit in to the treatment and the stress relief and the camaraderie of a lot of the because you and I had done some work for an organization, Stack Up, last year. We did that awesome fundraiser we had for those wonderful people who helped the soldiers with PTSD, and they get them video games and PlayStations and everything. And I'm just curious to see, because there's such a stigma and these people who don't know nothing who are running around on CBS or CNN saying it's just a video game, whatever. I'm curious to see how, when you do get out, and I know you're a big gamer because you're also a fantastic streamer on Twitch. Make sure you guys are following his channel. The most patriotic mullet I've ever seen. But I'm curious to see how video games have helped you in this process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which ones you avoid, which ones help you and make you relaxed. Obviously the camaraderie with me, Preach, all your friends that you've met and on Twitch and PlayStation, Xbox, PC, wherever you are. And just where it fits into this whole, because video games in general have a stigma from people who don't know.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a waste of time. It's this, it's that. You're never going to make $1 doing that. All that garbage we've heard. And it's bigger than the Hollywood industry. And how many millions of people in the United States play video games? And just to see where it fits into your study, I'd be so interested. Because as you talk about it, I'm thinking of the Call of Duty level in Modern Warfare with the A1C, and then you zoom in with the 3 cameras, and then they got the 3 different guns, and
working through the scenario,
and the good guys with the trackers on, so you don't blow them up.
IR beacons,
the IRB,
and I think of those things, and I'm like, fucking cool.
And that's actually an interesting point to bring up too, because actually the VA has looked at VR therapies as well. So they're looking at like virtual reality therapies and things like that. Now it's more so for like if you were a gunner and you need like exposure therapy, which is essentially working through some of those scenarios with it, and so they can kind of put you back in a turret, if you will, and you can go on convoys and stuff like that. So it is interesting to take that even one step further and see some of the therapies that are coming out from it as well. And they are recognizing that there's some utility with utilizing VR and things like that as well with it. But absolutely the baseline to it, because I play all sorts of games, but the ones I kind of gravitate towards are like Rocket League and stuff like that.
That's what I was asking. Yeah,
kind of that kind of thing. And I just I used to be a huge into first person shooters. I probably could have like competed, and like when I was like 16 in Halo, like the original one, that kind of thing. But as the years went on, I just kind of got more and more away from them. Kind of thing. And I'm sure that has to do with it, because again, you avoid things with PTSD, and you avoid places, feelings, or certain movies I don't watch, because I'm just
alcoholics don't go hang out at the package store.
Exactly.
You live the movie. You don't need to watch it.
Exactly.
If I'm addicted to cigarettes, I'm not going to 7-Eleven every day staring at the packs of Marbs like
Exactly.
You're not gonna. Yeah, I understand that. I don't go and hang out in the hostess aisle while I'm getting on the treadmill so I can look at the Twinkies.
Exactly.
So that's smart behavior.
DoorDash is the devil for me when I'm losing weight, man.
Yeah, it sucks.
Just right there on your phone. You're lazy. And you're
hit that button.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I moved out to the country. I can't afford. There's like nothing that DoorDash
exactly.
So I'm like either I'm making dinner or we're not eating. So
you're not gonna escape me when I come out to visit you. We're gonna have a good time. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
Well, Blackjack, Preach, do you have any final questions?
Yeah, I got one more. I do have one more question, and it was actually because you're talking about how different people will get to hear this, and hopefully they'll seek out help and stuff. But also for your study, I was kind of going, what is the scope of it? Are you just looking to interview people who are, because you kind of talked about people who've been like out for 10, 15 years. Are you also including people who maybe in the last 2 or 3 years have retired and gotten out of it? So you can maybe see the scope of like how it's impacted over time versus just getting out. Like, are you and should we never know who might stumble across this
Of
podcast,
course.
and so what's the scale of who you're trying to get to talk to and stuff that would be
Absolutely.
interested?
Just really any veteran drone operator or support personnel.
Okay.
So, so not doing the job now, but, I don't care if you got out, a week ago,
Right.
if, or 15 years ago, whatever. Just trying to get a good, accurate depiction of veteran drone operators, with it.
Okay.
And because, when someone only does like 4 years or 8 years, I did 8 years. I did 2 4-year enlistments, and so that's just separated, right? You're not retired from the military. You have to do 20 years to be retired. So some of that terminology gets thrown around, and that's why I like to clarify it a little bit with it. It's just I don't care, right? Like as far as like if you're retired, if you just separated, a week ago, but you were on drones, like I want to hear it. I want to hear from you, kind of thing. And like I said, it'll be a survey, and especially for any of them, because a lot of people get out and obviously go and do this job as a civilian. I did that, and working for government contract companies and things like that, and they don't have to worry at all. There's no PI collected. There's no personal identifiable information collected, anything like that. It's all scrubbed, so nothing is going to come back to anyone filling out this survey, or anything like that. All I'm going to be looking at is the answers, kind of thing. And then the only thing I'm going to house is obviously the contact list to redistribute the survey out when it's done. But there's not like, oh, I don't want to fill this out because I don't want this to come back and ruin my security clearance or ruin my, whatever kind of thing as well. So, but yeah, anybody that, I mean, if they were a part of the community in any way, and the only requirement is that you're not actively doing it now, because I want to see, the veteran population with this, and get the numbers on that, and really, how is that community doing with their mental health, because I've got a hunch that it's not so good, kind of thing with it. So
I'd be curious to see, as things changed from the time you did it, the time before you did it to now, what the ramifications on mental health are now as opposed to when you did it, a decade ago, as opposed to the first guy who did it, maybe more automation, maybe more, different model drone. Different types of missions, different front, like whatever it was.
Maybe there's more help for them now,
maybe
as they've learned in the military.
Maybe you're going to see hopefully we see. I think we all hope for this, but the guys the guys and gals you talked to from 2 weeks ago come out, or maybe they haven't been out long enough maybe to process. Because but let's say a year ago or whatever the timeline is, they come out and they maybe are doing better. Because they did get better support inside the military as they come out from it, which would be obviously that's what we all want. And then the first guy, the first Spartan you're going to talk to, the first guy to drop a bomb, which is amazing. How is he handling it? Because he was the William Wallace of the whole thing, charging forward on it. Yeah. So where can people who want to talk to you about this particular issue reach you? Twitter and Instagram, wherever you are, and then B, what your Twitch handle, so when you do stream and people want to hang out with the most patriotic mullet on Twitch, where can they find you there as well?
Absolutely. So as far as reaching out for the study itself, and I'll post this here.
And we'll put it in the description of the podcast, so put it in this chat, and Preach and I will make sure it's on the YouTube and the Spotify and Apple and everything too.
So I'll get that's my university email. We'll get here in the description for it as well. And really just reach out to me directly through that, and I'll get your name out of the list. And then once I get to the point of distributing it, and everything else there, I'll kind of be active on socials and things like that. LinkedIn, I post a ton just with UAS community as a whole, and I've been, I've got a lot of great support there. So just looking up Tanner Yackley on LinkedIn there, and I'm sure we can throw my name in the description there.
Yeah.
With it, but yeah, that's really the big one. Is just reach out to me via email, and that way I can keep everything in house as far as the lists. I don't got to scroll through 10 different social medias and try to find
this guy
wanted
to keep names hidden if they're not posting on Instagram.
Exactly.
Like, hey, hit me up.
Gives me a lot more control there, just doing it via email.
Sure.
So that's the best way, is just reaching out to my email there and just saying, hey, I'm interested in being a participant in the study, and then I'll pass updates and things like that. I'm going to get a listserv going for updates on the study as well with it. And even if you're just interested in the study period, same thing. Let me know, because I'm separating that as well, just for supporters and being able to help push these findings out for people that may not be directly impacted, but they might know somebody, or that just might find it interesting. With it, like I said, because exactly, anyway,
donate, help,
so,
whatever it is.
Absolutely. So so that's the biggest thing, is just reaching out to me via that email and being able to, I'll get you added to the list, and I hope make a huge difference for this community that's so deserving.
And Plyrock has one question for you.
Yes.
When am I going to get the Yakety Yak back? When are we going to
We'll
go
see.
all the
We'll
way
see.
back to the old school?
I know.
You and me, one more time.
I know.
Live
We
from
need to ride
2018.
together. We need to ride together again one more time. So absolutely. So I'm working on it. I'm hoping to get back and do it. Hoping to get back to streaming and everything else.
Well, we miss you there, and we wish you all the best. Preach, thank you so much for all you do. You're absolutely amazing. Listen, he's the professional podcaster, not me, Victoria, so he did a great job. Blackjack, we love you. I'm so glad you did this interview. We're going to share it everywhere. If anybody's interested, we'll have your contact information like you had down in the description too. And you guys will be able to watch this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, wherever you find your stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Plyrock. That's the professor. We're out of here. We love you, Blackjack. Goodbye, everybody.